What is up, Marvel fans? Welcome to another review, recap, breakdown, and discussion of WandaVision Episode 5, titled On a Very Special Episode, and that it certainly was. Now, today I have got so much to talk about, so to avoid this video going on for a century, I'm going to try and slap it out straight away, so go ahead and like this video if you do go on to enjoy it, and most importantly, I would love to know your thoughts on everything I have to discuss, because there's going to be a lot of that in this breakdown. Right off the bat, love this episode. I'm glad that we got back to the kind of sitcom element of it, and that's very interesting to say when a lot of people still aren't on board with that. Now we're in the hybrid state, like what I thought we would be in, where we're getting some real world outside Westview stuff and some sitcom stuff. Now, for the most part, I love this episode. Well, I'll save it for when I save it, but I have a couple of issues that I feel are perfectly logical. I still love the show. I just feel like even if they do go on to address what I'm about to address in this video at some point and stick around for it, it still is a little bit too little too late kind of thing, and I would love to know your thoughts on that, so make sure you stick around for that point I'm gonna bring up. So the episode picked up with a new era. I love it. I love each exploration of each era. I just want to put this out there. Love Paul Bettany, and I love Elizabeth's kind of acting again. I love the sitcom elements. Some people may not find it funny. I've already seen plenty of comments about that, but I love seeing any moments we get like this. So we saw the twins crying, we had Wanda parenting, trying to get them to sleep, and then as she just says we need some help, Agnes comes in, of whom has a couple of tricks up her sleeve. We had Vision being a little bit protective, and that really started the downwards descent for Vision, I would say, on his view of Westview, because it started to all kind of collapse. Now, Agnes says, do you want me to take that again? Should we just take it from the top? Once again, a very eerie moment, and this is what, yet again, evolves Vision's suspicions of Westview, because literally it was like scene rehearsal, right, of a stage play. It's like you might have not gone the way the script was according to go, so she's like, should we take it from the top? It's the same kind of status quo of weird things happening in WandaVision's previous episodes, but yet again popping up in this one. Even though it really does seem as though that Wanda herself is being painted out to be the complicated antagonist here, and you may have heard me talk about Wanda being the bad guy or the antagonist for this series in my last week's review, even though I don't fully subscribe to that, because it's way more complicated than that, right? With the mental health struggles, the grief, why this is happening in the first place, the fact that she shielded Monica on her way out with her red mystical magical energy, and I'm very glad they addressed that, because when she got yeeted out, you could argue, why did her back break in several different places? So like, she's not villainous for villainous sake, and that's what makes this whole series as a premise very, very interesting. But what I'm trying to get onto the point of here with saying, you know, it may seem that Wanda is the overall antagonist, I wanted to address this anyway because of the Mephisto speculation and how there could be some deals being made for Wanda's extension of power here, you could say. I'm not saying she isn't capable of this power, but the theories are still out there for Mephisto contributing to Westview because she may have made a deal with the devil or something to try and rush things along to live in her own little bubble. That kind of theory you may have heard about before. So let's talk about Agnes, because Agnes sprays some lavender stuff to help the children sleep, and I just wanted to put it out there, even though she said it has a calming effect, the twins no longer cry and then they grow up. So let's just put it out there that the spray kind of stuff may be an Agatha Harkness, Wicked Witch of the Westy kind of potion. Who knows? Just wanted to put it out there that some of you may have been thinking that, or if you didn't think it, and you're still subscribed to the Mephisto involvement, and maybe how Agatha, or should I say Agnes, who might be Agatha, might link to that, well, who knows? That might have something to do with the children's accelerated growth, even though you could easily just as argue that the children's accelerated growth is just playing along the status quo of the pregnancy and Wanda's whole own reality that doesn't exactly have its own rule set, shall we say. But those kids were very, very cute, and I loved that intro. Oh man, this has to be my favorite WandaVision TV intro yet. It was just hilarious. Just the baby Vision parts. Look at baby Vision, even though it's not baby Vision, but you know, they probably did just... That might even be a younger photo of Paul Bettany, and then they just kind of, you know, Snapchat filtered, obviously CGI'd his face to put Vision on there. I don't know, just a cool little possible theoretical tidbit there. But then, as I kind of predicted, and I'm sure a lot of you did as well, the new status quo going forward with episodes would show the sitcom aspects of the show, but also the real world MCU outside of Westview stuff. So we had Monica getting the brain scan. The first thing she remembers is being in pain, and then Wanda's voice in her head, and there was just this feeling of keeping me down, this hopeless feeling like drowning. It was grief. And then I'm pretty sure in that, I'm hopefully showing the screenshot right now, we got a little striking clip montage in that moment when Monica was describing what it felt like being in Westview, of Wanda crying, like grieving for Vision's loss. So what she was describing there is every single person in Westview, just as we found out with Norm later, is experiencing an extension of her grief, which is almost unfathomable. You know, people's mental health differs from person to person, but you could only imagine what Wanda feels like, to the point of where director Howard recites what Monica says as being excruciating, violating, because of how much pain is being projected from Wanda's grief onto the citizens of Westview. This is when Jimmy Woo and Darcy check in, and the brain scanner results of Monica come out blank. Now, I was hoping they would reference that again later on in the episode, because last week you may have heard me mention, if you're sticking along with the reviews, that, ooh, who knows, there's some theories out there that the whole yeeting out of Westview that happened to Monica could have given her some kind of photon Mark II powers, if you will, and I just find it suspicious that the MRI brain scanner or whatever she was going through there was blank. What if that's because she's got some of that cosmic radiation that Wanda's magical field is emitting, and once she passed through it the way she did, it kind of gave her some weird... You know what I'm trying to say. And as a result, the brain scanner doesn't pick up that. It's just blank because of the weird cosmic radiation power metahuman stuff resonating out of her head. Doesn't appear on a scan. Just wanted to put it out there. Not saying I'm right, but who knows? More food for thought for you. This is when we got a briefing for the Westview anomaly, and, you know, just the whole Wanda Maximoff is the principal victimizer, not really a victim herself. They explain her history in the MCU. I found it interesting how the director brings up any alias for her, like Scarlet Witch is what we kind of know about her from the comics, but, you know, no funny nicknames because MCU has failed to give her that this whole entire time. But who knows, at the end of WandaVision, they could don her the Scarlet Witch after all of these events that happen, for better or for worse, after the season 1 closing episode. Now, director Hayward obviously has quite the bias against Wanda, even going as far as calling her a terrorist. Jimmy Woo, Darcy, and Monica definitely don't agree with that. Director Hayward also tries to bring up Monica's explanation, of which I aforementioned, of her experience through Wanda's mind control, as excruciating, terrifying, and a violation. But Monica points out that she doesn't believe that Wanda has this political agenda or any inclination of violence or malicious intent here. I do like how they play devil's advocate with director Hayward here. Even though as annoying as we all may find him, he does have a point with a certain way of pointing out how she's holding thousands of people hostage. But then, yet again, Monica, with the other side, the angel side, says, but it could have been thousands more if she hadn't put up her own quarantine. So Wanda's grief here, as we're all thinking, isn't her necessarily deliberately doing this. It's just her mental break. And even she is trying to contain this. Because they talk about when Vision says right at the end of the episode, I have to believe this was all subconscious to begin with, and I agree with that. I think she took the body, she knew what she was doing there, but at that point she was going through like a psychotic break still, so I think when this whole Westview thing started, it was still kind of unbeknownst to her, and that's why the cosmic radiation was spanning, as I mentioned in previous episodes, is currently at a safe limit. That's only because she herself, as Monica pointed out, it could have been thousands more if the field of effect went a much bigger radius, if you know what I mean. So she's even half aware of that and tried to stop it, so she's kind of acknowledging that she's got people hostage. Parts of her aware of it, of course, but she's not fully subscribed to what is going on. And that even does contribute to how I've mentioned in previous reviews of how even with Wanda isn't fully aware all the time across the season thus far of that she's in Westview. Like, she has those zoning out moments as well. On the side note as well, I mentioned in last week's review, and like a lot of people were thinking, yeah, the tensions between director Hayward and the true heir and director of S.W.O.R.D., Monica, are definitely rising. Because ultimately, Monica doesn't believe it's a premeditated act of aggression, which I think is very true. Wanda has gone out of her way to, like, not kill people, hurt people. And it's just interesting because in that very scene when it was first unfolding, I just thought how different this operation would be going if it was under the directing aspect of Monica, like the heir of her mother who started S.W.O.R.D. It would be a much more diplomatic kind of approach rather than take the shot, like director Hayward has to approach it like. But this episode's pace just keeps building and building because this is when we got the top secret, highly sensitive material from S.W.O.R.D. HQ, and we see Wanda blast into that top secret location of where Vision's corpse was being held. This was 9 days ago as of the events of what we saw in that briefing room. She stole Vision's body and basically resurrected him. So this does kind of low-key confirm, even though a lot of people were thinking it, when we saw the dead Vision with the hollow bit there and she snapped out of it, that it isn't actually like technically a recreation of Vision. It's actually his dead body revived within that own reality. And I guess technically if he went outside of it, like we kind of see in the trailers, what may happen to him? Maybe he will cease to have the fuel that makes the car run, so to speak. But I found it very sinister, as you could see in this top secret location of how those scientists or whoever they were dissecting him. We had like the torso in the middle, the head, the arms on different tables. Poor Vision. They'd point out how what she's done is against the Sokovia records and Vision's own living will. He didn't want to be anybody's weapon, and Maximoff, in her grief, apparently disregarded his wishes. Now, not technically true, because Wanda isn't equipping Vision as a weapon, so that's technically not against his will of becoming a weapon after the death, if you know what I mean. If anything, you could argue, after what director Hayward said, at this top secret location, those scientists, through the different slabs of Vision's body parts, if they were trying to reverse engineer him, they might have been trying to weaponize him after his death, through trying to understand the technology that made him him. So I don't know, just another piece of food for thought there. But anyway, moving along, Tommy and Billy find a dog, and we had Vision being formal because he has a hunch that Agnes might pop over with exactly the item they needed. Wanda even uses her powers more or less in front of Agnes. Vision obviously takes issue with this because Wanda doesn't really want to hide anymore, and maybe Vision shouldn't either. But as Vision said himself, Wanda, we are usually so much of the same mind, but right now, what aren't you telling me? As I said, things are getting very sus for Vision. I find it hilarious how the boys can literally age at will, so they aged up to the age of 10 to take care of the dog. You can definitely kind of see where this may go in the next couple of episodes in terms of how they can age up a lot more and become certain characters of the comics. And I also found it super interesting, if you've watched the trailers, that Monica thought of a safe way to potentially re-enter Westview with certain materials on wheels. Now, this could be that moment in the trailer that you're seeing on screen. We have that kind of weird car trying to storm its way through. We have somebody piloting, and that's probably Monica trying to enter with said materials that should breach the barrier. So maybe she's really trying to get in at some point towards the finale where things potentially, as I said, I think it comes down to that cosmic radiation that was within certain limits. But if it gets bigger, could be catastrophic, which is why there's a response to this in the first place. But Wanda isn't technically aware of all the adverse consequences this reality could bring, even though she is kind of, because she set up a field. This is where it gets a bit complicated. They discuss everything in there being real, which would require an insane amount of power if they are indeed solid matter, which would be far exceeding anything she's shown in the past. Now, this comes back down to the Mephisto stuff. Does she have the capability for this power? Of course, definitely without Mephisto's intervention. But I think people are still linking in the Mephisto deal with the devil thing because maybe he lent her some kind of juice or whatever to make this whole thing possible, make things real. The ability to bring Vision back may actually supersede the powers that she has inbuilt. So that's why I mentioned that theory earlier, but let's wipe that whiteboard clean of Mephisto ideas. She could just still be doing this with her own abilities, because as they said herself, she has the capability to defeat Thanos, really. And that brings in and links to the gripe I kind of have later, but as I said, stay tuned for that. This is when it also links in with Monica's clothes, which are indeed real. She even shoots them, and they are bulletproof, because when she went inside, as I've said in previous videos, her clothes, like her ID tag turning into the sword necklace, translate into something new. But what happens if you send in something else that requires no change. Something of that time period, which, oh boy, leads to a very triggering moment for Wanda. But going on to the Vision side of things, this is when he gets an email and some creepy stuff happens. And very, very, very interesting stuff that builds up to that kind of climactic moment of the episode. So it said, top secret communique, Dr. Darcy Lewis findings regarding Maximoff anomaly, high levels of radiation present at the perimeter, effect on Westview residents unknown, please advise. As I said, high radiation. Oh, what could this do to potentially Monica? Make her possibly photon, and what could it do to the other residents? This could bring in 3,000 mutants. I don't know. You can see how all these theories are coming from the radiation, maybe. The thing about this is that everyone started reading that at the same time, and Vision at this point was like, right, what the heck is going on here? And he touches Norm's head, basically snaps him back into reality, and he says, what day is it? How long has it been? You have to stop her. And Vision is obviously really shook. Like, he knows, okay, these people are in Wanda's control, basically, as he says later. So at this moment, Sparky the dog starts growling at the door. Wanda gets up, goes outside, and it's a drone from the 80s. One that didn't have to change, of course, because it's in the right time period, so that allowed them to get a clear kind of reconnaissance of it without it being interrupted. But of course, Wanda, manipulated that with her powers to just basically break it, but stupidly, Director Hayward was like, take the shot. Monica obviously wasn't aware that the drone was armed, which is when, because of what happened, Wanda leaves the field. Oh boy, I thought that scene from the trailer was going to be like episode 8 or something like that. She drags the drone, she's very angry, isn't remotely afraid of all those guns pointing at her. It's kind of like one of those Magneto moments where it's just like, psst, you really think that scares me? Now, this is where things get a little bit problematic, but also as much as I love it. Trust me, it doesn't bother me that much, but, as I do review these things, I try and look at things critically as well. She says that this will be your only warning. Stay out of my home. You don't bother me, I won't bother you. Now, Monica says that she didn't know the drones were armed, but they point out that she does have kind of a town in hostage, and she says in response to that, well, I'm not the one with the guns. She doesn't really seem to acknowledge that there's over 3,000 people in there. Now, I don't really have so much of a problem with that, because she's very mentally struggling right now, so you can write off the fact that she doesn't address that at the end of the day. She doesn't want to be bothered, but you can understand, or Wanda should understand, why the government is bothered and other people are bothered, these agencies, because it's 3,000 people being held there against their will, and not only that, they're experiencing basically a living hell. Externally, they're not. They're just, living their time error lives outright. But internally, they're living the holy God knows what grief that Wanda is going through. So, it is bad. But I'm okay with that because of the anguish and desperation to live her own little world, right? That I can understand that. But the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, my issue is with Sword's incompetence. Now, I didn't initially find so much of an issue with this earlier on in the episodes, but after speaking to fellow people in my Discord server, definitely join, people have pointed out to me, and I can't refute this, that Sword is beginning to look extremely incompetent. Now, I'm not saying there's the Avengers that are formed out there right now, but there are members or ex-members of the Avengers, and this is most certainly an Avengers level threat. So hear me out here, I am not hating, this is just a bit of logic that I feel like the show could have easily fixed just through implementing lines in their script. So bear with me here very, very quickly whilst I talk about this. They basically addressed how Wanda is a freaking Avengers level threat anyway. They even said in this episode that she could theoretically have taken on Thanos. Captain Marvel got close, right? And they've known for the longest time, whether they're not necessarily immediately in harm or not, that she has 3,000 odd people there being captive, whether there's malicious intent or not. That would really, from episode 1 or 2, or in this case 3, when we saw Sword's perspective, or was it 4, your immediate response as a sentient weaponry observation and response division would be to get one of the Avengers. The most sensible one would be Doctor Strange, right? But let's just say for real world reasons, they don't want to get Benedict Cumberbatch in, and they might do for the after credits scene. I'm not saying they won't, but let's just say for the sake of it, they can't get him, the actor, in for real world reasons. They could have still got any wizard to consult on the magical barrier and things like that, but it's just like that they're not. And I think that is problematic. You could be like, oh yeah, but they're still like casing it out. They don't necessarily know it's a big threat or whatever. They might not be able to get a hold of a wizard for some reason or another, because I keep saying wizard or one of Stranger's wizards because it makes the most sense with the field and stuff like that, right? So I trust you with me there. But the reason why it's an issue is because if you're not going to do it for whatever reason, like you don't want to solve the story too quickly, and maybe through bringing a wizard in, they might have been able to get a few answers quicker, just write it in your script. Give a line or two in the episode as to why they're unavailable or what they're doing. When you don't do that, you make S.W.O.R.D. look very incompetent, if you know what I mean. And technically, yes, this is an Avengers level threat because, as I think we're all aware, the Avengers have responded, or should I say, like, look, if you're going to say the Avengers technically aren't formed right now in the events of the show, any member, any prestigious member individually has responded to something like a bomb blowing up in the market, which is a lot less for the potential threat of what is going on with Wanda here. They've already acknowledged how powerful of a threat she could theoretically be to take on Thanos. So do you see why I think when shows have external world building things that can help, if you're not going to bring it in because you don't want to solve the season too quickly, right, which I totally understand, all you need to do is write something in the script. Darcy mentions something. Director Hayward says something like, oh, you know, the Wizards are doing something with Doctor Strange, I heard. We tried buzzing them in New York or whatever at the Sanctum, but, you know, anything like that will stop people from being critical. And I don't think that's nitpicking at all, because when you set up a world and you have established characters, and I've given them the benefit of the doubt saying that certain characters may be busy, but let's just say bring in any old wizard. You need to say why you can't, because they would have been very helpful. I know I'm blabbering and blabbering right now, but as I said, at the very least, it just makes this government agency completely incompetent with the fact that they're not calling on anyone else. I'm not saying the Avengers need to respond. I'm really not, even though technically they should, but like, I'm not saying they have to. Just anyone. Why is it just being left down to guys with guns? This is Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, potentially 3,000 plus hostages, which she actually didn't even acknowledge. So by now, at the very least in this episode, even though I argue right from the beginning they should have called for some kind of professional meta-human-y kind of backup, right? Especially now they need to. Now, I'm not saying they still won't, but as I said, even if they do bring in somebody like a cameo from Doctor Strange himself, you should argue that they should have called him in. Let's assume they bring him in at episode 8 or 9 for a scene. They should have brought him in, or a wizard in, 5 episodes early at the very least, because, like, Jesus, you have 3,000 plus people in a place that you don't know what's going on. When you don't know what's going on, you get somebody like that to consult on what's going on with the magical barrier so you can help understand it more. You don't just not call people there who are technically out there in the world. So mention it in your script. That's what I'm going to say. Anyway, though, this is when they try find Sparky, and we have Agnes there with him dead. Now, this is very interesting. Yet again, you could contribute this to the whole what's going on with Agnes thing, because yes, theoretically, you could have eaten those leaves. Things like that do kill pet animals, unfortunately. But you could argue, what if Agnes put the dog up there on purpose to make the kids grow up? Even though they didn't, but like, you know, it could have been like another theoretical Mephisto tempting or accelerating what's going on with the kids, because maybe he wanted them to be sad to accelerate whatever his big dark plan is, and Agatha could be an agent of that. I don't know, just wanted to put it out there again. It could have just been to deliberately point out Wanda's hypocrisy in that moment, because she quite literally says there are rules in life. We can't rush aging because it's convenient, and we can't reverse death no matter how sad it is. Anyway, end of the episode now. Vision reveals that he spoke with Norm, unearthed the man's suppressed personality and spoke to him free of her oversight, says he was in such pain. He confronts her about changing everything over again. He even asks what's the Maximoff anomaly, and as I said, in this moment, I really feel sorry for him. Poor bloke. Like, he's dead, and he got brought back, and I just feel like, oh, this poor guy is discovering this really, you know, eerie, horror thrillery kind of setup, if you really want to look outside the perfect bubble that it is, that we're all fully aware of it being creepy, and he's so confused. As I said earlier, I do love the line of when he says, I have to believe whatever this was subconscious at first, and that you only recently became aware of it. Without repeating myself too much from earlier, as I said, she definitely deliberately stole the body, as we said, but when she probably was with the body, tried to bring him back, maybe the whole breakdown caused Westview, and since then, she's been aware of it every now and again. Wanda says, "You've never talked to me like this before," and Vision says, "Before what? I can't remember my life before Westview. I don't know who I am. I'm scared." And this really just kind of makes Wanda painted out to be the antagonist more than ever, which is going to make it very interesting. You know, as I said, an understandable, complex antagonist slash protagonist, the antagonist. But what will make it very interesting is if after all of this, in the next few episodes, they reveal a twist of that there is an external force that has made this a possibility, like Mephisto. Because right now, they're really painting it to you, like through Monica at the end of the other episode saying, "It's all Wanda." That's very on the nose. This episode, they make it seem very obvious that it is all Wanda. And I'm not saying it isn't, just like the comic book storyline where she lost her mind. This is all happening. She's in denial. You understand it, but it is kind of bad at the same time. So as you said, complex antagonist here. But what if they really spin it on its head again? And it's like that as well, on top of some interdimensional deity existence of a being like Mephisto. Who knows? But at the end, ladies and gentlemen, we had the doorbell ring, and so Evan Peters shows up. As he says himself, "Long lost bro, get to squeeze his stinking sister to death, or what?" And as Darcy said, she recast Pietro. Yes, she did. Which makes things super interesting because we all know where Evan Peters' version of that character came from. So it's like, what is this actually really doing here? I don't know. Like, I could give you one explanation, but it's like, does it really connect those universes because he's just been recast, or is it just happening to be he looks like Evan Peters, but that doesn't technically make him the Evan Peters from the other versions of the movies we've seen. It's super complicated, but either way, like, I'm not going to blabber on this part too much, other than this is something that was spoiled out there for a while. We all kind of potentially knew this would be happening this very moment right here, but I'm more interested in the bigger repercussions and next week's episode from what happens with Evan Peters as her brother returning. Super, super interesting stuff, especially as we all know Pietro is dead, but Wanda's own reality, things are real in there. At least within the bubble, just as we found out this episode and we knew anyway. So I would love to know what you think the repercussions of Evan Peters' version of Pietro will be. Either way, it's a super, super cool like cameo in of itself, and I'm loving this show so far. I really am. I'm really enjoying it. Problems and gripes, like I mentioned, don't destroy things like this for me, but critically, that I feel like writers have a responsibility to address things that could help accelerate an investigation going along, especially when you've got characters who could very much so contribute to solving, or at least assisting and consulting what is going on, especially when certain Avengers members have formed or collaborated with agencies to prevent things like a bomb blowing up in a market for a lot less. That's not being nitpicky, it's just that, hey, just include a line from the director saying, hey, we can't get a hold of this person or that person. And that really does fix stuff. It really does. It makes it a lot more airtight. But without that kind of scrutiny aside, I really enjoyed this episode. WandaVision is fantastic. I was worried and apprehensive about the hybrid of the sitcom and the real life stuff coming into play this episode, because I really actually enjoyed the sitcom stuff, and I thought, how are they going to balance it? Will it be as fluid as what I hope it will be? But it was. I'm glad they didn't give too much time to the real world stuff as well. And they gave a very nice balance, if not a little bit more to the sitcom this episode than just the real stuff. But what did you think of this episode, guys? What did you think of everything I had to say? I would love to know all your theories and discussion down in the comments below. I know this has been a lot more of a longer video, but I think it's justified with everything crazy that is happening right now. If you got to this part of the review and breakdown, thank you so much for supporting me in these reviews. If you did, I would really appreciate it if you proved it by typing in baby vision in the comments with whatever else you have to say, because that way I'll heart your comment as well, because you're one of the real ones who really got this far and helped support the channel, and thank you so much. But if you are still here and you're not subscribed, definitely subscribe. Check out my links in the top pinned comment to my Discord server, my social media such as Twitter, where I'm most active. Follow me there. But thank you so much for watching. Hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fans of the Marvelverse in the next video. Goodbye.